umbilical surgery. To understand this, first we must know the little bit of anatomy of the interior abdominal wall. Interior abdominal wall is innervated with anterior rami of T7 to L1. This includes intercostal nerve from T7 to T11, the subcostal T12 nerve, and ilioinguinal and iliohypogastric L1 nerve. All these nerves travel in the facial plane between the internal oblique and transverse abdominis, and that is the basis for this block. This involves the deposition of local anesthetic in facial plane between internal oblique and transverse abdominis muscles. A single injection can block many nerves together, interrupting sensation to the abdominal skin, muscles and the peritoneum. It takes about 30 minutes to be effective. So we have to either put it pre-operatively, or if we are giving it post-operatively, we have to cover pain for 30 minutes. It can be given bilaterally or unilaterally depending on the surgery. Cadaveric studies have shown that a single injection in this spreads up to T10 level, and therefore it is most useful for umbilical surgery. An additional subcostal block with 10 cc of local anesthetic can be given by placing the probe parallel to subcostal margin. Any anesthetic agent can be used from lignocaine, bupivacaine, ropivacaine. We are using ropivacaine 0.2%, 25 ml on both sides. Adequate volume is more important than the concentration for this block, because this block is volume dependent. Indication, as I have already told you, are lower abdominal surgeries like cesarean section, hysterectomy, colectomy, appendicectomy, hernia repair, umbilical surgery. It has been also found useful for laparoscopic surgery. It is specially indicated in cases where you cannot give epidural block because of some problem in giving it or some lack of time. There are two methods to give it. One is a blind through angle of Pettit, and the other is the ultrasound guided. Angle of Pettit is formed on the lateral abdominal wall by the interior circle is formed by the external oblique. The lateral border is marked by the latissimus dorsi, and interior border is marked by the iliac crest. You blindly put a 25 gauge 50 mm needle just behind the mid-axillary line above the iliac crest, and a single injection of a local anesthetic of 25 to 30 ml can be given after 2 pops are felt. Ultrasound guidance has improved the technique. For ultrasound guided block, we require an ultrasound machine with a high frequency probe of 5 to 10 MHz, ultrasound probe cover, antiseptic for skin disinfection, a sterile ultrasound gel, needle and injection tubing, and 20 to 30 ml of local anesthetic. When the patient is made to lie supine, cleaned and draped, an ultrasound probe is placed between the costal margin and the iliac crest. Needle is put in by in-plane technique that is parallel to the ultrasound beam. Once you put the probe on the patient, this is what you see. Skin subcutaneous tissue, the external oblique muscle, the internal oblique and the transverse abdominis. And the plane between the internal oblique and transverse abdominis is the plane we have to reach. Needle is put from the medial side as shown of the probe initially, and visualize the image of the needle is visualized on the monitor. When it reaches the plane, we put 1 ml of local anesthetic to confirm and followed by rest of the dose. You can see the needle, it has reached the plane. Little bit of local anesthetic is put, and you can see the split between the internal oblique and the transverse abdominis muscle. And this further local anesthetic is being injected, and the spread can be seen in the plane. There are very few complications of this block. Only one major complication was seen of an intrahepatic injection of local anesthetic, but this was only seen in the blind technique. And in this patient had a hepatomegaly, which was not seen preoperatively. Other complications which can be intraperitoneal or bowel hematoma. Because we are using a lot of local anesthetic, so toxic dose should be kept in mind. Intravascular injection can easily be avoided by any other local injection we give before aspirating before injecting. I would like to show a small video of this. This is a patient under general anesthesia. This is a tray which we have. These are the markings of the subcostal plane and the iliac crest after cleaning the patient. By this one single injection, you can block all the innervation from T10 to L1, and even if it's been T, it covers up to T7 sometimes. So this is a very good block and very easy to perform with minimal of complications, especially with ultrasound guidance. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
You all know this procedure is very much effective and interesting when we go in the workshop and see in our own eyes the performance of the scan. So anyway, we have already a nice session yesterday and probably you are enjoyed it. Now we will call up Dr. Savani Bashir. She will present multi-nodal analgesia in the post-operative triage. Savani, please.
We have an important announcement. If any of you have your travel plans to leave this evening or by tonight, to please put in the travel plans to Ms. Nalini Gupta at the registration counter so that the vehicles can be arranged accordingly. Good morning, respected chairperson, sir, respected seniors and dear friends. Multimodal anesthesia in the post-operative period. How we do it or how we should ideally do. May I bring greetings from B.R. Singh Hospital and Center for Medical Education and Research, which is the place of my work. In post-operative pain management, if the surgery was successful, why shouldn't the pain management be? This is the question we should ask ourselves. How many of us do really believe that we give adequate post-operative anesthesia to our patients? As a result, post-operative pain remains still undermanaged. This is a comparison between 1995 and 2003, but the picture remains almost similar even today. As a result, patients continue to silently suffer post-operative pain because of the lack of the concerted effort on the part of the anesthesiologist and the surgeon to relieve this pain. The significance of post-operative pain is that it is the most feared complication among patients. Inadequately treated in almost 50% of the surgical procedures, more than 80% of the patients experience post-operative pain, of whom nearly 2/3 experience moderate to severe pain. 8% postpone surgery because of a fear of pain. Pain is defined, according to IASP, as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. According to Tax and Melzek, pain is a personal and subjective experience that can only be felt by the sufferer. And according to McCaffrey, pain is whatever the experiencing person says it is and exists wherever he says it implies. That means we should believe a patient when he says he's in pain. Comes from the Latin word pena, meaning punishment, and it is the 5th vital sign as per Jacob. In pain physiology, we have nociception, which is followed by transduction, transmission, perception, and modulation. In transduction, the pain stimuli is converted to electrical energy. In transmission, this energy or impulse travels via the A delta and the C fibers. In perception, the somatosensory cortex identifies the location and the intensity of pain, and the physiological and behavioral responses are perceived. In modulation, involves activation of the descending pathway that exerts inhibitory effect on pain transmission. There are several causes of post-operative pain, like incisional from the skin and incision, deep from the deeper structures, from coagulation, cutting, and trauma. In positional pain, due to nerve compression, traction, etc., where it source. From the IV sites, because of needle trauma, extravasation, etc. From the different tubes that are in the body, brains, nasogastric tubes, from respiratory, from coughing, deep breathing, etc. Rehabilitation, that is movement and ambulation of the patient. Surgical, that is complications of surgery, and others, that is too tight dressing, urinary retention, etc. And all this while, we had been thinking that post-operative pain is caused just by the incision of the surgery. So you can see that the post-operative patient is in pain because of several factors. How do we assess this pain? It can be done quite easily by the numeric scale, the categorical scale, and the visual analog scale, also by the FACES scale. Now, what are the types of post-operative pain? Mainly, it is nociceptive in response to the noxious stimuli. It can also be inflammatory because of tissue damage and inflammation, and it can, in some cases, be neuropathic due to damage or lesion to the nervous system. The nociceptive pain arises from the peripheral noxious stimuli and is responsive to opiates, NSAIDs or coccips, and paracetamol. The inflammatory pain is due to the release of inflammatory mediators following tissue damage and is responsive to NSAID coccips, which are anti-inflammatory drugs, paracetamol, and opiates in that order. The neuropathic pain is due to peripheral nerve damage and is responsive to local anesthetics, anticonvulsants, antidepressants. It is less responsive to opioids, and there may be no response to NSAIDs and coccips or paracetamol. Post-operative pain is mainly nociceptive in nature and therefore responsive to opiates, NSAIDs and coccips, and paracetamol. Opiates remain the cornerstone of treatment of moderate to severe pain for post-operative pain management. Now, what are the harmful effects? Why are we so scared of pain? It's only pain, but it has several effects on different systems of the body. In the respiratory system, there is decreased cough and lung volume, there is atelectasis, sputum retention, infection, and hypoxemia. In the cardiovascular system, there is tachycardia, hypertension, increased myocardial oxygen consumption, myocardial ischemia, and deep vein thrombosis. In the gastrointestinal system, we have decreased gastric and bowel motility. In the genitourinary system, we have the retention of urine. There is increased levels of catecholamines, cortisol, glucagon, growth hormone, vasopressin, aldosterone, and insulin in the neuroendocrine system. There is anxiety, fear, lack of sleep, and insomnia. And finally, the muscle spasm and immobility may lead to increased risk of deep vein thrombosis. So, therefore, we need to control pain, and the benefits of good pain control are early ambulation leading to rapid rehabilitation, fewer thromboembolic complications, and shortened hospitalization. This leads to reduced healthcare costs and better patient satisfaction. So, the answer to all our questions regarding adequate post-operative pain management is multimodal analgesia. What is multimodal analgesia? Multimodal analgesia is achieved by combining different analgesics that act by different mechanisms and at different sites in the nervous system, resulting in additive or synergistic analgesia with lowered adverse effects of the sole administration of individual analgesics. The advantages of using multimodal analgesia are better analgesia, less side effects, decreased hospital stay, improved surgical outcome, and finally, less chance of developing chronic pain. What are the options available to us for multimodal analgesia? Opioids, paracetamol, NSAIDs and coccips, local anesthetics, NMDA receptor antagonists like ketamine, anticonvulsants like gabapentin and pregabalin, noradrenaline and serotonin reuptake inhibitors tramadol, and alpha-2 adrenergic agonists clonidine and dexmedetomidine. All these drugs can be used in different permutations and combinations in multimodal analgesia according to the requirement of the patient and the profile of the patient. The site of action of the analgesics differ. The local anesthetics and the anti-inflammatory drugs act at the site of trauma. The local anesthetics act at the peripheral nerves. The opioids and the alpha-2 agonists act on the dorsal horn cell and also on the somatosensory cortex. The methods of administering multimodal analgesia are also multimodal. They can be given orally, intramuscularly, intravenously, epidurally, or peripheral nerve blocks. Also, we have the option of patient-controlled analgesia, which can be given either intravenously or through epidural analgesia. So to summarize, we have the opioids as the cornerstone, along with NSAIDs, Coxib, paracetamol and nerve block, which potentiates multimodal analgesia, leading to reduced doses, improved pain relief, reduced severity of adverse effects, earlier discharge and decreased costs. So I will sum up by presenting you three cases. Barbie Dolores, 18 years, female, has come to the emergency with pain in the lower abdomen. She has fever, leukocytosis. Her abdominal examination reveals rebound tenderness, and emergency laparotomy is planned under general anesthesia. So some of the choices which we could give her in the post-operative period are local anesthetic infiltration of the wound site along with opioids, NSAIDs or Coxib and paracetamol infusion. Almost after 10 years, Barbie comes to us again. She's pregnant now. She's at term gestation. She's mildly hypertensive. She's having heartburns. She's posted for elective LUCS under spinal anesthesia. So some of the options which are available to her in the post-operative period for pain control are spinal adjuvants, because she's already had a spinal. She could be given adjuvants like opioids. She can have a paracetamol infusion in the post-operative period along with wound infiltration. 30 years later, Barbie again comes to us. She's in pain with a fracture of the right lower limb following road traffic accident. X-ray shows that she has bone fracture of the right lower limb. By now she has developed coronary artery disease and she's posted for open reduction internal fixation under epidural anesthesia. The choices we have now are epidural adjuvants, nerve blocks, paracetamol infusion and opioids. We would not give her NSAIDs or Coxib because she has, especially Coxib because she has coronary artery disease. Now, to sum up the recommendations for multimodal techniques, as per the practice guidelines of acute pain management in the post-operative setting, this report has been updated by the American Society of Anesthesiologists Task Force on Acute Pain Management and has been published in the Journal of Anesthesiology, February 2012 issue. It summarizes that whenever possible, anesthesiologists should use multimodal pain management therapy. Central regional blockage with local anesthetic should be considered. Unless contraindicated, patients should receive a round-the-clock regimen of Coxib, NSAIDs or acetaminophen. Dosing regimen should be administered to optimize efficacy while minimizing the risk of adverse events. And finally, the choice of medication, the dose, the route and the duration of therapy should be individualized. Thank you for a patient hearing. We hope to give all our patients a pain-free post-operative period. Thank you.